Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to the first session of the spring semester of the Tuesday Times Roundtable. For those that don't know, these are our weekly sessions from the Office of Global Learning, sponsored by the New York Times, in which we discuss different global topics. Today, we have an amazing topic to start off, but before we get to do that, I wanted to share a few updates from our programming. Do we have any honor students? Perfect. So I don't know, for those that are honors, now our sessions count as honors points as well, okay? So if you're an honor student, please see Taylor or myself at the end. We have a specially designated sign-in sheet for you guys, so please don't forget to see us at the end. Or also, if you're medallion students, come see us at the end so we can sign up. What else? We have fellowships, we have scholarships, we have our Peace Corps prep program. Applications are about to close on Friday. We are volunteering together this Saturday for the Center of Leadership and Service, MLK, Annual Day of Service. We are volunteering together. So if you want to be part of our group, please sign up, pick the FIU Nature Preserve, and put Office of Global Learning Initiatives on the affiliation. What else? We have transformation contests and Ask Us More at the end as well. You can come with us to a trip to DC in May. Applications close at the end of the month. To learn more, please follow us, go to Go Global FIU. You will know about all of these opportunities, fellowships, scholarships, co-curricular programs, trips, and also you will learn about other opportunities from other offices, okay? So Go Global FIU on Instagram. Without further ado, and I don't want to take any more time from your presentation, I have, today our session is Gender Violence Across Borders. It's a great, great topic to start the semester. And we have Raji Uma. She's a recent FIU graduate and a Global Learning Medallion alumna. She's currently working with FIU Housing and Residential Life as a building assistant as she prepares to start her master's in public administration this fall. She worked with the Department of Women and Gender Studies, where she studied online violence against women in the US and Brazil in a federally funded project. She also spent the summer of 2017 in southern India, where she conducted independent research on the effects the education system has on rape culture, and carried out sexual assault prevention seminars in various educational institutions. Thank you, Raji. We have also Yandra Mariano. She's a recent FIU graduate and also a Global Learning Medallion alumna. She's currently working at the Robert Temple College of Public Health and Social Work as a research coordinator to reach unrestricted services for transgender women, or TRUST. She plans to start a master's in public health this upcoming fall. Under the Department of Psychology, she conducted an independent research project focused on Indian young adults' perception of the intersection of autonomy, empowerment, and domestic violence as a Magner scholar. Through the Millennium Fellowship, she was also able to pilot the sexual health education experiences and empowerment study, also called CHIC. Thank you so much, amazing work. We are so glad that you're taking the time to share with the rest of the students, so thank you once again.
Thank you, Florencia. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Sorry, can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay.
All right, so we're going to introduce ourselves first. So let's start with me. So as mentioned before, I recently graduated from FIU fall 2019, and I graduated with a BA in Psychology and Interdisciplinary Studies. During my time at FIU, I was a part of McNair, Global Learning Medallion, the Millennius Campus Network, and the Honors College. And my research foci is focused on intimate partner violence and sexual health.
My name's Raji Uma. I go by Uma. I also recently graduated from FIU this last summer of 2019 with a bachelor's in international relations. I specialize in human rights and gender studies. I came in through the Global First Year program. I was an international student all the way from Kenya. Hello. I also did the Global Learning Medallion program, which is how I got to meet the LACC, which is the Latin and Caribbean Center, which funded my research. I also was a part of FIU Model UN and FIU National Organization for Women, and all of these kind of interconnected to shape my college career in research. My research foci is TFGBV, sexual assault, and research methods. We're going to give you a little bit of background about the topic.
Okay, yeah, so first, before we start, we're going to start with some abbreviations and terms. And the first term is IPV, also known as intimate partner violence, and it's defined as the abuse or aggression that occurs in a close relationship.
Another important abbreviation we're going to be using is GBV, which is gender-based violence. This is obviously violence directed against a person because of their gender. It's important for us to acknowledge the fact that both genders face gender-based violence, men as well as women, but these terms, gender-based violence and violence against women, tend to be used interchangeably because it is acknowledged that most gender-based violence is inflicted on women and girls by men. Another term we're going to be using is TFGBV, which is technology-facilitated gender-based violence, which is gender-based violence that is facilitated by technology, and it could include anything from behaviors such as stalking, bullying, sexual harassment, defamation, hate speech, exploitation, and gender trolling, and it's usually carried out through over the internet, using mobile technology or computer technology.
All right, so the next term is sexual health literacy, and this is the degree to which individuals have the capacity to obtain, process, and understand basic health information and services needed to make appropriate health decisions. And lastly, our final term is social determinants of health. This is the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. And I put this little graphic here just to show the breakdown of the various categories that fall under the social determinants and some examples that can influence a person's health outcomes. So we have economic stability, neighborhood and physical environment, education, food, community and social context, and the healthcare system.
We have a video here for you to just really quickly address GBV, gender-based violence.
A study carried out by UNDP, UNFPA, UN Women, and UNV surveyed more than 10,000 men in 6 countries across Asia and the Pacific to find out how many men perpetrate violence against women and to understand from men themselves why it is so. Men's use of violence against women in Asia and the Pacific is both varied and widespread. At least 1 in 4 men said they used violence against a partner. At least 1 in 10 men said they had raped a woman or girl. Half the men who raped did so for the first time when they were teenagers. Violence can be prevented. Yet whilst the problem may appear to be too complex and persistent to be solved, our survey has shown us why some men use violence and others don't. We found that men who experienced or witnessed abuse as children are twice as likely to use violence in later life. The study reaffirms that men's use of violence is about gender inequality and men's attempt to control women's sexuality and choices in life. Most men who rape said they did so because they felt they had the right to sex, regardless of women's consent. Men who were violent against women were more likely to behave in ways that celebrated male toughness and violence.
All right, so that was just an introduction to what we're going to be talking about today, which is gender-based violence. So when talking about gender-based violence, it's important to address underlying perceptions of gender and IPV to identify why it even occurs in the first place. So currently in the literature, IPV is defined through 2 different perspectives, feminist theory and family violence theory. Feminist theory states that patriarchal ideology has a greater influence on heterosexual dating and relationships, and that's why IPV occurs, while family violence theory addresses that IPV can arise from a aggression out of like regular disputes between family members, and then it'll escalate into things like IPV. So identified determinants of IPV across different geographic locations that can lead men to engage in IPV are upbringing, substance use, socioeconomic status, and attitudes and beliefs about gender. Attitudes and beliefs about gender had a pretty great influence in the research project that I conducted within the community of Mysore, India this summer, because of things like globalization and the caste system, which both had a major impact on the sexual health literacy of the emerging adults within that culture. This is crucial to note, as sexual literacy has been shown to have a direct impact on an individual's health outcomes. And as I mentioned before in the definition of sexual health literacy, it extends beyond the basic sexual education of a person into a more deeper comprehension of what sexual health is. So when we're discussing different sexual health outcomes, it's important that we be aware of the fact that low-income communities are at a greater risk for negative sexual health outcomes, such as STD acquisition, unwanted pregnancy, and gender-based violence.
When talking about technology and gender-based violence, which is my focus, it's important to remember the two schools of thought that exist. One is the feminist ideology that she expressed, which is the fact that technology is an evolved form of society that still finds a way to oppress women and uphold patriarchal standards. But the other one is the idea that technology is actually empowering and can be used to share stories, such as the Me Too movement, which actually allowed lots of women to share their stories, and not just women, but also like men and other people to share their stories, and gave access to people in marginalized communities to legal aid that allowed them to get justice for whatever issues that happened. So there is benefits to technology. But my study was focused on the studies that exist on technology and gender-based violence, which meant I was trying to see the issues with studying this topic. And one of the biggest issues we had is defining the problem. Because of how far-fetched technology is and how fast it evolves and how global the scale is, it is difficult for us to define the issue here. And when you have that type of issue, it's difficult for you to come up with a solution. Another issue that comes with TFGBV is the concept of resentiment. When you're having a regular GBV situation, those type of things are usually considered lived experiences because it exists and you've experienced it and it's a lived experience. But with technology comes the ability for you to take videos and photos and upload it into the web and for it to exist constantly. Therefore, a lived experience goes from a lived experience to a living experience. So there is a resentiment of the problems that come with gender-based violence under technology. This obviously means that the effects that come off of TFGBV tend to be both long-term and can be anything from physical, psychological, social, and even economical. Some of the relationships that you'll notice between the perpetrator and the victims tend to start with just the relationship and ends with health-seeking behaviors by the victims. And that usually means that in between first meeting the perpetrator to the health-seeking tendencies that are shown by victims, you'll see that there is motivations and intents of the perpetrator. You'll see the frequency and duration of the experience, the social media platforms or the tools or the specific technologies utilized to perpetrate the act. So there's a lot of things that go in before they meet and the victim is actually going through the health-seeking behaviors. There's a lot of things that go under a TFGBV situation. Another part of my study was to compare it with Brazil, which is a country in Latin America, and therefore one of the biggest things that we saw was that the number of studies done in Brazil was far less than that we see here done in the US, and it tends to come into the ideas of researchers not being able to identify or like get proper statistics about the extent of TFGBV in Brazil. One of the reasons that's the case is because of victim attackers. In Brazil, you tend to see a higher case of victim attackers who are people who face gender-based violence over through online platforms, but tend to proceed to do the same to others. So are they victims or are they attackers? It's difficult to draw the line because they're both perpetrators of the crime, but also victims and survivors themselves. So it's difficult for us to get statistics on whether gender plays the biggest role in gender-based violence in Brazil. But one thing we did see was one of the studies showed that between 9 and 17 years of age, 25% of them are attacked because of their race or color. These type of things is pretty similar to what you see in the US, because over here you can see that race and color play a big role with TFGB victims and survivors. They tend to be more at risk for the effects of TFGBV. Another thing is we need to be aware of the cultural differences that can pose as a roadblock in the search of explaining this problem and trying to find the solution and explaining this problem.
Okay, so now we're going to talk. Sorry about that. Now we're going to talk.
We're getting down to the results.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the results now. So starting off with my study, which was based off of perceptions of IPV, what I did here is I kind of created a bar graph to show the results that the participants, like, to answer one of the statements that we gave them. This was the answer that they gave. So the statement says, if a wife is beaten by her husband, she should divorce him immediately. Automatically, we found a significant difference between sex and beliefs about wife beating. But then when we broke it down, you can see that mostly women strongly or just disagree with the statement overall, and men tend to agree with the statement. We think this is because of things like caste and conservative gender roles in a place like rural India tends to have like a lot of influence in what these people believe and what they think. And in terms of women, it doesn't provide them a lot of social mobility within this community to be able to leave their husband or divorce or separate and lead an independent life beyond this, because they know that they won't have successful health outcomes or just a high life expectancy overall. So the second statement that I'm presenting is men are better leaders than women, and I just wanted to use this as kind of like a point of reference to show the gender beliefs within the community. Again, women tend to disagree with the statement, but men tend to agree. So men still have the underlying beliefs that they might be better than women, or that they're more fit for leadership roles because they're probably encouraged to do those things in the first place in a place like India.
Okay, so for my research, one of the biggest outcomes was coming up with a questionnaire, which we're going to hand out right now. Thank you. Sorry. So if you want to, you can just like answer the questionnaire. It is a sample of the bigger questionnaire that I actually made for the study. This is just bits and pieces of it, just so that we could get the feel of the questionnaire and also get some feedback from people here and understand what actually happens with research methods and studying TFGBV and understanding the scope of it. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to answer it. Do we have pens around? Do you have any thoughts about it? Those who are done with the questionnaire, any comments, anything that you noticed in the questionnaire, anything that you think was interesting, or what do you think we are trying to achieve with these questionnaires? One second, she'll just give you the microphone.
Oh, thank you. Wow. It was very official. I think the last question asking if you enjoy receiving these kinds of comments was a great question, just because there's always that kind of argument, well, I mean, the typical what did she wear or something like that, and I feel like this makes it concrete that like seeing whether somebody actually wanted those remarks or not. And I guess I feel like most likely you get almost 100% of no, you don't want those remarks,
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought it was a great question.
Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts about this?
I like the question about what did you do in response to witnessing because it's especially since it varies across platforms, sometimes the most that you can do is just unsubscribe or unfollow or block the person. So sometimes it's what can you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an important question. Anyone from that side of the room have any opinions?
Hi.
Hi.
Great talk so far.
Thank you.
I'm a social science researcher, so I do a lot of questionnaires and I have a lot of background in it, so I want to give you some feedback on the top portion as well. But another thing you might want to ask in addition to what was your response is maybe how the response made them feel. And in terms of the answer choices for the strongly agree to strongly disagree, I kept thinking that it depends. It's not really that I'm indifferent. I don't want to go up or down, right, and say like I strongly agree or strongly disagree. But it really depends. So maybe building out these questions a little bit more, like under what contexts, would it be okay for these sexual references, or under what context would it not be okay? Like who would it be coming from, or yeah.
Yeah, so the actual questionnaire that came out of the study was at least 25 questions. This I took 3 questions out of all of them just so we could get a feel of it over here. So all the things that you said were actually there in the actual questionnaire, but I really do appreciate that feedback because it is valuable and it is true, because a lot of these things tend to like flow from situation to situation, and in the actual questionnaire, it flows from each point to the next point, but because we have limited time, I wanted it to be as short as possible but still get the feel of the questionnaire. So thank you. Anyone else, or we can go ahead?
Yeah, one thing about the questionnaire is it didn't really differentiate between like the types of social media that you kind of like in public and you make friends with people like Facebook and Instagram, and then like dating apps, which I think are also like a form of social media, because a lot of the harassment that I've received has been on dating apps. And on dating apps, it's kind of almost seen as like okay in some ways, because like you're there to date people, so like you should expect sexual references and all these things that you didn't sign up for or agree to. But like that's a big form of like cyberbullying and harassment is on dating apps, and it's kind of not seen as serious as something like Facebook or Instagram, because it's kind of like sometimes people say like you deserve it or whatever, just because you're on there, just by the fact of being on there.
Those are actually important aspects of the thing, which is why we go into the idea of, because of how ever-changing and evolving technology is, we need continued research. A lot of the research that we're doing right now cannot encompass everything. So that actually like was a great pave way to what I wanted to say next, because social media and technology is so far-fetched, so far wide, that a lot of the studies that we're doing right now cannot encompass it and is not enough. We need research that's continued and constant, because we need to keep up with what's happening right now. And the research that's happening right now tends to be very narrow in the sense of it is limited to a certain region, which we can't be having because of how technology in itself acts. You have someone from Australia could be abusing someone in Vietnam, and it's so like cross-cultural that we need more global research, and we need kind of interactions between researchers from different parts of the world and collaborations, which is the only way we'll actually be able to find anything that works in the global spectrum, because technology is that far wide. And therefore, that goes into the other part, which is being able to have research with cultural competence, taking us into another important aspect of our presentation. There's a quick video that we're just going to do about explaining what cultural competence is.
One of the worst, yet easiest mistakes people can make is to assume that other people are just like them. People from different cultures see and do things in many different ways. Let's take a look at cultural competence. Cultural competence is the ability to interact effectively with people of different cultures. A culturally competent person has the respectful awareness and understanding of cultural differences. There are 4 components to cultural competence. Let's take a look at each. First is awareness of our own cultural worldviews and our reactions to people that are different. Next is our attitude towards cultural differences. This reflects a willingness to honestly understand our beliefs and values about cultural difference. Third are our cross-cultural skills. This component addresses the importance of practicing cultural competence, including nonverbal communication, to become effective cross-culturally. Although some people are more naturally culturally competent, most of us have to put an effort into developing this skill. This requires honestly examining our prejudices and biases, actively developing cross-cultural skills, learning from role models, and having a positive attitude about cultural issues. The key to cross-cultural success is awareness. Being aware of how culture influences your interpretation of others, your own behavior, and how people from other cultures may see you. Understanding why we do things in certain ways, how we see the world, and why we react the way we do is an important part of being culturally aware. Cultural awareness can improve performance in culturally diverse organizations, or when an organization's customers are diverse.
All right, so with that being said, Considering cultural awareness for proper cultural competency is really important for us to be able to develop culturally appropriate resources that can actually help minority populations instead of hurting them. Doing so will also help the scientific community address sexual scripts that are damaging to different minority groups and around the globe, which will then decrease sexual health literacy, the gap of sexual health literacy. And cultural competency can also lead to heightened awareness amongst educators, government officials, and parents about the importance of sexual health literacy, which will aid the development of interventions that can prevent things like IPV and GBV.
Another big thing we need to be aware of when we're doing cross-cultural researches is navigating the white savior complex. It's very easy for us to go from America or wherever we are and go to another country and tell them this is how it needs to be done. And I know better, I'm in my moral high ground, like I know what's right, and therefore I'm going to come and tell you exactly how it's supposed to be done. If we're going to be looking at cross-cultural research and collaborations across the borders, it needs to be a collaboration, because if you don't understand the cultural references that come from their side, then you're not going to be coming up with solutions that are actually effective. And if they're not effective and they can't do anything, then that's a waste. It's a moot point. And then obviously we need to be aware of ethnocentric and Eurocentric effects, because if we go in with our thoughts and our views, then we're really not getting into some solution that's actually holistic and, again, effective. We need to be conscious and make conscious efforts to combat the prejudices we have. We can't go in with preconceived notions, and if we do, we need to be aware of them. Therefore, we can actually make that conscious effort. Again, awareness, going back to the video we watched. It's important for us to be aware of what we lack, and therefore we'll be able to combat it better. And with that, we round it all out, and we just have a few people to thank.
All right, so I wanted to thank the Department of Psychology, specifically my mentor, Dr. Dion Stevens, for allowing me to conduct this research and really just opening the door for me in the world of research. And yeah. Secondly, I'd like to thank the McNair Scholars Program for giving me funding and just giving me the platform to develop my research skills as a scientist. I'd also like to thank the Global Learning Medallion, specifically Yenny, because she's a light in a very dark tunnel in this entire undergrad experience, and I don't think I could have done it without her. I'd like to thank the Millennium Fellowship and the Millennium Campus Network for allowing me to pilot my Chic study, and the Honors College for allowing me to be a student with curiosity during my undergrad experience.
She also took some words out of my mouth, because I also want to thank Yenny and the Global Learning Medallion Program, because without Yenny, I wouldn't have gotten half the resources I did as an undergraduate student over here. She basically opened a lot of doors for me, and therefore thank you so much, Yenny. She introduced me to the Department of Women and Gender Studies and the Center for Women and Gender Studies, where I met Dr. Mora, who was my mentor and basically gave me the opportunity and guided me through this whole research. I also need to thank having the access of collaborative online international learning programs, which is the COIL, which is how I got access to Brazilian statistics and students from Brazil, which I think is a great opportunity, and therefore obviously very grateful for that program. And I'll also need to thank Kimberly Green, Latin American and Caribbean Center, because they funded my research, and we love funding. Thank you so much for that. With that, we just have our references, and we're opening up the floor for any questions, comments, discussion points you want to talk about. Anyone?
And before we go into that, when I was saying go Global FIU on Instagram to learn about all these scholarship, fellowships, opportunities, and programs that we have, and the Global Learning Medallion program, please follow us so you can learn more. Any questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Magda. I want to say this was really informative. It motivated me to become a researcher. You know, I feel like I want to leave my platform, my footwork on the grounds too. Because, it's just crazy how you guys were just like an undergrad and you guys did all these things. It's phenomenal. Pat in the back for you guys.
Thank you.
Do you guys, I know you did Brazil, but you didn't go to Brazil, right?
No. So the research that we presented today for both of us, we actually didn't go to the places. A lot of the research we did was secondary information. The statistics I used came from the students who are part of the COIL program, and they're basically they're students in Brazil who actually take the same classes as students here at FIU. It's the COIL program, and I got my statistics from them and this class, and then I basically read over like 100 articles over it, pretty much.
Do both of you guys plan on going to these countries and like redoing their research or seeing like the comparison between what you guys found?
Do you want to go with that?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to. Just, you know, I got to get rich first or something. Something has to happen for that to work out. But I think it would be interesting just because, like, it's so easy to talk about things like cultural competency and, like, developing questionnaires and talking to people that know their stuff, that are experts in the field, but it's actually different when you go there and you do the work and you recognize that there's an actual difference between cultures, and that you need to keep that in mind, because you can't just, you cannot have the white savior complex, like, leading you through your research. So.
Yeah, like, so I did this research was secondary, but the research I did before was actually 3 months in India, and there's a vast difference in when you're spending 3 months in a different place and like doing your sexual assault seminars in schools and institutions and working with students there, talking to women. I met over like 500 different women, talking about sexual assault or their perceptions of sexual assault. And it's completely different when you're there in the field getting that firsthand information, as opposed to like this one, which was just as like fruitful, I would say, but it is a different type of experience where it's a secondary experience. So I would enjoy going to Brazil and like getting that type of information from researchers on the field, but it is the type of study which is like online, so it's not the same as like, you know, education system and rape culture. It's kind of different in like how we address it. This one's very virtual related. Yeah. Any other questions? There's a question there. That's Dr. Mora, who basically helped guide the person I was thanking like a few minutes ago.
Hi, Adam Ropazar. Great presentation. I liked it a lot. My question is, because looking over the survey that you provided and just some of the other information, so when you talk about gender, are you also looking at things like gender identity and whether or not they're a transgender male, transgender female, to see like what those disparities are?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things in disparities we've seen with transgenders and LGBT community as a whole is that they tend to be more at risk. And again, like I said, it's more difficult for us to study these type of things because a lot of people who are, like we're studying is the age group between like peers, basically, so between 16 to like 20, and they're usually in the stage of like trying to learn and figure out who they are. So a lot of times when they're identifying themselves in these type of studies, they don't necessarily identify themselves as like either or they might just be like they don't want to disclose it. So it's still like a learning journey, and like that's why I'm saying there needs to be a lot more studies and a lot more people being aware about this and talking about this, which is when you'll be able to get more information about it. But it is a known statistic and a known fact that LGBT members tend to be at a higher risk of gender-based violence and and TFGBV.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions, comments, concerns? I guess with that would be it then. Thank you all so much for coming, being part of it.
Thank you.